Welcome to Hope Lies Waiting. I'm Joy, and this will be the first part of a three-part series about my life's journey. As someone who's looking for inspiration for your own life and finding hope, I thought it might be helpful to you to understand what I've been through myself, what made me in need of hope, and how I found it. For a simple beginning, I thought I'd start with the physical challenges that I've had in my life. Probably the biggest physical impact on my life is precocious puberty. Precocious puberty is pretty much exactly what the phrase means. Instead of starting puberty as a teenager, some children begin going through puberty during their grade school years, usually between 6 and 8 years of age. In my case, it was a little bit different. I began menstruating at the age of 9 months old. It was a matter of some concern to my parents, of course. No one wants to see their infant daughter crying and lying in pain every month, um, bleeding when she shouldn't be bleeding, but that's what happened. I was studied at a local medical clinic for several years until I was about 5 years old, I think, when I stopped going. It didn't help me specifically. I can only hope that by studying me, they learned things that helped them help other children who later also had precocious puberty. At that point, there were no growth hormone treatments or anything of that nature. I was basically just having to deal with what happened. When I entered kindergarten, I was already 4 feet tall and in need of a bra, which, well, made me very, very different from the other children in my kindergarten class. As many of you are aware, children going into school are now at an age where they really start noticing the differences between themselves and other children, and someone my size made them a little uncomfortable. So there was a bit of a barrier between me and the other children. I did continue growing until I was 8 years old, which is when I stopped. I was 4'8" at the time, and over the next 2 years after that, when all of the other children were hitting their growth spurts, I went from being the tallest child in my grade school classes to the shortest. So, again, I still wasn't really normal for them, and it made it hard to have any normal relationships that children usually have with each other. One thing that is common with precocious puberty is obesity, which, as you can clearly see, I am obese. It didn't help that my mother, having grown up through the Great Depression and always having enough food to eat, decided that she was never going to allow her children to ever go without food, and we got into the habit of eating more than we probably should be. There was also a history of obesity issues on my mom's side of the family, probably, from genetics passed down through centuries of, you know, ancestors living through famines and other situations where food would be scarce. So my body just naturally, it gets fed any food. It wants to store as much as possible as fat, just in case of future food scarcity. And that's been a lifelong battle. I've been on many, many diets, many doctor prescribed, which back then were basically starvation diets. And so the weight would come off, and as soon as I would try to resume eating what would be a normal diet, the weight would instantly come back on. It was just the body going through that cycle of starvation, food, starvation food, just decided that it's always going to be at risk of starvation and acted accordingly. Another issue that I've had, which should be somewhat obvious, are my eyes. I do have to wear glasses. As a small child, I had a muscle issue in my left eye that caused it to turn severely inward. That required an operation when I was 5 years old to be fixed. So I went from wearing super thick bottle lenses, trying to be able to see, to almost normal size glasses. Um, but again, it was another difference between me and some of the other children in school, and so, yes, naturally, I was 4 eyes. Another vision issue I have is visual snow. For those who aren't aware of what visual snow is, probably the best way to describe it is to say that the person has static in their vision. If you can remember the good old-fashioned TVs shows that you'd pick up, through antenna signal, and if your signal wasn't coming in very well, there would be all sorts of snow static all over the screen. That's what vision can be like for a lot of people with visual snow, although there are different forms of it. In my specific case, the static is little itsy bitsy tiny pinpricks of colored lights just dancing around all of the time. Not so strong to interfere with my vision that much, except sometimes at night, but certainly distracting. But for me growing up, I thought everybody saw it this way. I thought this was just normal. And it came to surprises me when I found out, no, most people actually don't have to live looking through the world through all of this static. So it's been kind of strange. In addition to the visual snow, I have tinnitus, or as some say, tinnitus, which is the ringing in the ears. I do have it in both of my ears, although it's noticeably louder in my right ear. And every now and then it could be either ear where I'll get a very loud, sudden burst of sound that will gradually fade after 5 to 10 seconds. I did at least know that the tinnitus wasn't normal because my mom had also suffered from it and had mentioned it when I was a child, so I understood what it was. It can be very distracting, especially when I get those bursts of sound suddenly, but for the most part, it doesn't really affect my quality of life all that much. I also had issue with my teeth. Having precocious puberty, I had adult teeth trying to come into a child-sized jaw, and that caused them to become very, very crooked. And so I did have braces during the later years of grade school. Once the braces came off, I got retainers, which was, of course, intended to keep them straight. But being a kid, I stopped wearing them after about a year because they were just so uncomfortable and awkward in my mouth. I didn't like it. So over the years, because I'm still stuck with adult-sized teeth and a child-sized jaw, I've had my teeth start becoming crooked again. In addition to some neglect that has caused many of my teeth to chip and break off that have not been fixed. But I'll talk more about that in part 2 because it's very much related to my emotional journey. The last physical issue I have worth mentioning is a knee injury that I suffered almost 20 years ago. It did heal at the time, but again, due to neglect, which again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to go over in the next part of this series, it has come back to trouble me again. And it can make life pretty awkward. Knee injury plus obesity plus short stature. It very much limits a lot of the things that I'm able to do in a world where homes and furniture are designed mostly around adult proportions because The expectation is children are going to be growing up too quickly to make it worthwhile customizing furniture for their purposes. And I don't have the money to be able to pay for custom work on my own, of course, so I just kind of have to find ways to adapt and adjust. When it comes to storing things in cabinets, I have to leave everything in the lower cabinets. I can't put anything up on higher shelves because my knee won't allow me to go up a step ladder to be able to reach those shelves at all, as an example. It's just very awkward. The rare occasions that I go out on errands, I do need to use a cane, and I walk very, very slowly, which can be frustrating for other people if they're accompanying me. I have been through some physical therapy, and I've got a little bit of an exercise routine that I do engage in, but unfortunately, things don't change enough for it to make a real positive difference on my life. So that's pretty much the physical that I've been through over the years. Nothing major or dramatic compared to what many people go through, but still it's had an impact on me coupled with other things. So I will go ahead and leave off this first part here. Second part is going to be regarding the emotional issues that I have dealt with in my life, which are probably far more significant on my need to find hope than the physical have been. Until then, I wish you all peace, love, and joy. Thank you.